One example I showed you how we can handle two-way binding technique. So in two-way binding, we learned about NG model, how we can deal with NG model, right? So today we will see some more options here, right? I will share the screen, right? Wait. Yes, I'm sharing the screen. Okay, 1 second. I'm sharing the screen and we will see what is there right here. Okay, so yesterday we discussed about the two-way binding example. So we saw how to handle the data, accessing the data and displaying in the view, and at the same time showing the data and allowing to make the changes in the data. How we can allow to make changes in the data. Another important point we discussed. So after understanding how do we deal with the data, we need to discuss about working with various other techniques here. Actually, in the last session, when we learned about two-way binding, this is the example we designed. Now, in this example, the data binds to the view and any changes in the view directly, immediately updates so to the model. So let's open this local host, and you can see it directly updates to the model. So in this example, we are making changes, and these changes are directly updated there. So we want these details to be updated only when it is required, only when it is required, right? What you are talking about, Ramjatan? What I have said yesterday, I already given in the code. Once go through that, right? Yeah. So here we don't want to update the changes until the button is clicked or any specific operation. That means how we can manage this, how we can manage this client side, right? Yeah. So here technically, what we are doing now is just below this, we are adding a div and another class as form group, and here I'm adding a button. It is register, and we are defining a class btn and btn primary and btn block. Okay, so we have a button, and when register button is clicked, on register button click, I need to update those details here. So I added a button, and we can see we have a button here. So we need to collect the data and update the data on button click. Immediately whenever user is making the changes, I don't want those changes to update there. So immediately it should not update. So instead of register, suppose I defined here, because already we have some data, and update, I'm just using update. So I want those details to be updated on the update button click. That means from the view, it will go to controller. Controller will collect the data and it will update to the model. In the current situation, the view is directly updating to the model. But according to MVC hierarchy, it should go to the controller. Controller should collect the data and use the data. Let's see how we can manage that. Actually, we have a lot of techniques to deal with data. So in this, we have three properties: name, city, and stock. And these properties are binded with text box, with the controls, as well as these properties are binded into the table also. These properties are binded into table. So table is using name and the city and the stock status. It is displaying them. It is using them. Now what we want is it needs to update only when the button click. So we will create another object. We will create another object, public, and a product object. This product object comprises of name, and the name is initially empty. Okay, it comprises of city. City is also initially empty. Okay, and in stock is by default false. So something. So that means a string and boolean. This is an empty. Now what we will do is we will write a method and we will use this detail to display inside the view. That means I will go to the view. Inner HTML should not access from this name. It should access from this product name. This is binded with the text box. Name, city, in stock, those are binded with the text box. We want these details to be used in the view. Then you can see that here inner HTML, we need to bring from a object product, and in the product, the name, we are applying that. And here we are accessing product and dot city. Okay. Here we are checking product dot in stock. So we are verifying if it is true, then what should happen. So initially we are not binding the same properties that are binded with these controls. We are using a new object called product. Product name, product city, and product in stock. So important is now here you are making any changes. Suppose mobile, and you are selecting some shipped to something, and you are selecting some yes or these are not affected here. You can see in the table those changes are not affected. I selected yes, it is not showing. Out of stock it is showing because still we haven't, by default you can see by default it is false. By default it is false. That is the reason it says out of stock. All right. So if by default it is false, we don't want to show anything. Later we will see in the next level also we will discuss some more. Now important is whatever the changes you are making, they are not updating here. On update button click, we need to collect those changes and update into this location. So to the view. That means this product need to be updated when user clicks update click button. So I will write a method update click. This update click method should fire up when user clicks update button. What this update click method should do, it should update this dot product object. How it should update this dot product object? This is current product object. The name should get value from this dot name, and this dot name is nothing but the name coming from text box. So whatever the name you entered in the text box, that name is collected and updated here. Similarly, city, it should come from this dot city. It should access this dot city. And in stock, it should access from this dot in stock. This dot in stock. It should access the details and should. So that is what we need to manage. It is accessing the details and display and save this. Now update click is a method which should fire up when user clicks on update button. So for the update button, we will write a click event. Later we will have a separate session on events. It's a big concept. As of now, yesterday I showed you events are binded in the parenthesis. Event name is click. And when click happens, we need to access and execute the method update click. That means when button click, this function will execute. That function will collect the values from the controls and updates those values into this product object, into the product object. So now what happens here is I am entering some details. So here like Nike casuals, and I selected a city and in stock and click update. Now the details are updated here. You are making changes in any city. It is not there here. I am removing in stock. It is not updated here. Until or unless I click on update, then it will update those details. It can update those details. So technically now we are using a MVC framework. That means the model, view, and the controller. So the view is this UI. Controller is your TypeScript, which collects the logic, which handles the interaction. From the view, data comes here. So from here, the data goes to view. That means from controller, this data goes to view. From the view, the data comes to controller, and that is updated into a model object. And that is product is one model object. Into that data is updated. Currently, we are having the data here. But later, the data comes from various locations. JSON data, various services, third party, from backend server side technologies, we can access the data and use the data. That we will see how we can handle, how we can work with them, we can see. So, but this is one simple example of how the controller handles the interaction. Yesterday's example was directly updating those details, Whenever you are making changes, they are updated. But now we are sending to controller. Controller will update into the model only when the update button is clicked. Then it updates the data and display. So this is the two-way binding technique by using two types of internal frameworks working here. Either you use MVVM or you use MVC. So handling the interaction between the model, the view, and the controller. So two-way binding can be handled by using a directive ng model. And ng model uses property binding and attribute binding. By using property and attribute binding, it can update the data and bind the data with the model. So this is one important technique of data binding. Two important data binding techniques we have seen. So one is one-way binding, another one is two-way binding. Some changes we have made in this example. So we have two-way binding dot component dot ts. In this, from yesterday's example, we just made some changes, right? This is the logic of two-way binding. And in the HTML, same. Only one event is added with a button. So two-way binding dot component dot HTML, and it is having the basic HTML. So this is the HTML. Only one change in this is we added a button and not only button click, a function will update, and here we are using a different object to collect the updated data and use the data. That is how generally two-way binding works. Now, once we know how the two-way binding is handled, that means we learned data binding. That means accessing the data and updating the data. Next, important, after understanding the two-way binding, now very important point is we need to know about another important concept, Angular directives. Angular directives. So in the data binding, we need to understand how to use various directives. This all comes under data binding concept only. Means how to bind and how to handle by using directives. Let's see how we can manage the directives, technically how we can work with the directives. Actually, what is a directive and how to handle the directives, so is very important while working with Angular. And generally, I told you one point about directive. So directive is technically a function. Directive is technically a function. Technically, directive means it is a function. And important, directive is responsible for extending HTML. That means directive is responsible for converting the static DOM element into dynamic DOM. A directive is responsible for converting the static DOM element into dynamic DOM. It converts the static DOM into dynamic DOM. Static DOM into dynamic DOM. That means the static DOM elements are converted into dynamic DOM. And important is they make HTML more declarative. So directive makes HTML more declarative. It makes HTML more declarative. Actually, it extends HTML. That means, suppose you have seen just now, input type is equal to text. It is a normal static DOM element. It is a normal static DOM element. It's a text box element. Now a directive comes onto this, and the directive you saw, we used ng model. This directive is making this DOM element dynamic now. That means it is collecting the data from this and updating the data and handling the interaction. I already told you the point, like, so this directive is extending your HTML and making your HTML more interactive. That means it's handling the functionality, everything inside this Angular brace, inside the Angular brace. That means inside the Angular brace, all the expressions are handled. So the static and dynamic, it takes control over that. That is the reason this technology named as Angular. I told you that point. Why it is named as Angular? What is the intention of naming it as Angular? The intention of naming it as Angular is within this Angular, it takes control over the application. You don't need a separate you don't need a separate functionality every time. So you just can configure everything inside this Angular and make the static into dynamic within the Angular. Earlier, we cannot write much inside this Angular. We have to write everything inside the logic, means application logic. Now this technology allows you to write inside the Angular the dynamic components and make the static into dynamic. That is the reason. So this technology can extend HTML just within the Angular by defining several directives. So that is the reason. So we call this as directive. Then technology is known as Angular. And very important, actually, you should know that directives have different types of functionality. Directives have different types of functionalities. Actually, they can be used as element. You can use directive as an element. They can be used as an attribute. They can be used as a class, and they can be used as an comment. A directive can be used in various types. So directives are used in different types. Actually, directives are used as element. Directives are used as elements. To return markup. Directives are used as elements to return markup. That means we have directives like this. So ng-form. This is a directive. A directive is written like an element now. This is ng-form is a directive. We are writing like an element. The intention of writing like an element is to return some markup. It returns a form. Similarly, we have some directives like router-outlet. That is a directive, and router-outlet. Here, the directives are used as elements. According to the situation, directives have a lot of behaviors. A directive can be used as an element. Directives are used as directives are used as attribute. Directives are used as attributes to extend HTML. Directives are used as attributes to extend HTML. We will work with them, all of them. I'm showing the consequences, how directives are used. We can use directives as elements. We can use directives as attributes. Attributes means, you see here, input type is equal to text. And we are using here ng model. Some txt name is equal to ng model like this. Now in this case, we are using directive not as the element. We are not using ng model is a directive, and it is not used as an element. It is used as an attribute. Directives are used as elements. Directives are used as attributes. Directives are used as attributes to extend HTML. Directives are used as elements to return HTML. Means different directives have different behaviors. Angular provides lot of directives, and different directives have different behaviors. Some directives are used as elements to return markup. Some directives are used as attributes to extend markup. Some directives are used as classes. Directives are used as classes to make the markup more interactive. Like suppose we have a input, or say simply some span. We have directives which are used as classes. So that means we have a span. Span can use a class. So we can use a class like ng valid. It is a class. That means here directive is used as a class. We can use the directive as a class ng pristine like this. What are those? You don't need to worry. You are going to learn about them. I am just showing that directives are used in various ways. We can use as a class, we can use as an element, we can use as an attribute. That means some directives are used as classes, some directives are used as elements, some directives are used as attributes, depending on their behavior. When we learn about directives, I will tell you whether to use as an attribute or not, like that. And very important, directives are used as you can use as comments. Directives are used as comments to target legacy browser. Actually, we write in HTML comment. Some directives are written in HTML comments. ng model, some txt name like this. We write like in HTML comments. These type of directives are responsible for targeting old version browsers, binding the data to them, accessing the data from them like that. We will see different occasions, different options, and how do we deal with these options, right? Technically, directives play the key role in Angular. So major interactions, data binding and other interactions are handled by these directives only. Directives are responsible for making the static DOM into dynamic. And very important is directives have 4 behaviors: element behavior, attribute behavior, class, and comment behavior. According to the nature of the directive, it is used in various ways. And important, Angular directives. Angular directives are classified. Angular directives are classified into three groups. Into three groups. Angular directives are classified into three groups. So we have structural directives. Structural directives. We have structural directives. We have structural directives. And we have component directives. First, already we learned the component directives. We have component directives. Component directives. We have structural directives. And we have attribute directives. Attribute directives. The Angular directives are categorized into three groups. And of course, in these three, we know already component directives. Component directives we already know. Component directives are nothing but what we learned about component. That means the component directive is the most common directive. Component directive is the most common directive in Angular. Actually, we worked with that. That means it is a template. We know that it is a template. It is a template that comprises of, component is a template that comprises of logic, presentation, and styles. Presentation and styles. Component directive comprises of three things. So, and component directive, it is used for dynamically rendering HTML. Dynamically rendering HTML. It is used for dynamically rendering HTML and handle interaction with user. It dynamically renders HTML and handles interaction with user. And already we know our component directives comprises of three parts, like home dot say like login dot component dot ts. It contains logic. And login dot component dot html. It contains presentation. And login dot component dot css. It contains styles. And very important is how you can use this component and handle it in any another component. Actually, it uses a selector, app login. By using this app login, we can access and use it. Now, in this case, this component directive is used as an element. How to access a component inside another component and use it, we will see in the later stages. Currently, a component is completely reusable actually. Currently, we just learned how to design component. A lot of things are there about component. We need to know how to use a component inside another component. How do we access the component in another component? So how to reuse the components, how to reuse the functionalities. So in that case, a component is also a directive, and a component directive is used as elements. You can inject this into any another component and you can handle the functionality. So whenever you need a login functionality, you can just inject this login component and use that functionality. And this component returns a markup and allows interaction with the user. So this is general. Already we know that component directives. So very important is currently we are creating our own components. We can access and use. That means we can access and use built-in components, built-in components, built-in components. We have several built-in components. So from a library called Angular Materials, Angular Material. Angular Material is a library which provides several ready-made components for you. We can access those components and we can use for our application. How to use that materials in the later sessions we will discuss. That means everything you don't need to design. Suppose I want a date time picker. If I want a date time picker, a ready-made component is designed for it by Angular library. You need to import it and you have to use it in your application. Suppose you want some grid-like control. You want like chart-like controls. Ready-made components are present. We can access and use it. They are provided by this library. So how to use these built-in components, we will see in the next level. How do we work with them? Initially, so we are creating our own components and we are using these component directives in the application. So these are component directives. Already we know how to create our own components. Later we will see how to use existing components. Another important is structural. Another important is structural directives. Another important directives, we have structural directives. Actually, structural directives, why they are called structural directives? Because the structural directives are responsible for changing the DOM structure dynamically. So that means a structural directive is responsible for changing the DOM structure dynamically. It is responsible for changing the DOM structure dynamically. And very important is changing the DOM structure means it can add elements, it can add or remove element, it can add or remove element, it can add or remove element, and it can iterate over element. So it can iterate over element, and it can switch between elements, between elements. So it can perform the functionalities like adding element, removing element, iterating over element, switching between the elements. So dynamically controlling. And what are the structural directives? Angular structural directives are, we have directives ng if, we have directives ng for, so we have directives ng switch. So we have the directives ng for. These are the primary directives. So the structural directives of Angular, ng if, ng switch, ng for. So of course, inside ng if some more are there, we will see them, how to handle and how do we work with them. So structural directives are added to HTML element as attributes. That directives. Why to use these directives? What is if, what is switch? We will see with examples. One by one we will discuss about them. Angular structural directives, we have ng if, ng switch, ng for. Why they are called structural directives? Because they can control the DOM structure dynamically. How, you will see now. They can control the DOM structure dynamically. And usually structural directives are added to HTML DOM element by using an asterisk. Structural directives are added by using an asterisk. asterisk. That means we have to write like this. So div. So we have to use asterisk ng if, and we have a list item. So like asterisk, we have to use ng for like this. One important restriction is there. I will tell you about that restriction. So the restriction is every HTML element can use only one structural directive. That means here, suppose I'm using li, so I'm using ng for and some condition, and I'm using another ng if in the same with some other options. This is invalid. It cannot. So every element can use only one structural directive. And how do we handle multiple? So that we will see in a multi-level hierarchy we can handle, but directly multiple cannot be applied. So every element can have only one structural directive. So these are all important things we need to know. Now we will see how to handle these structural directives. What is the purpose of ngIf? So how we can use the structural directive? ngIf is one important structural directive. And what is the purpose of this ngIf directive? Actually, in the library, it is provided in capital NG and IF. But when we use as ngIf, that is camel case. We have to follow this. Every time in the library, it is provided in the capitals, right? And now when we are accessing, we have to use this. Actually, ngIf is nothing but it is a structural directive used to add or remove any DOM element dynamically. Add or remove any DOM element dynamically. So that means it is a structural directive used to control the structure of DOM by adding and removing any DOM element dynamically. Actually, so it uses a Boolean condition or value to add and remove DOM element. So how it can handle? Let's see one simple example. And why we need this actually. Suppose, so without ngIf, suppose we have one general DOM manipulation. That means how we can handle. Suppose I have a image. I need to hide an image. I want to hide an image in the view, and I want to display only when it is required. I want to just hide a picture and show it only when it is required. In that case, when you want to hide image and display only when it is required, in that case, generally in our JavaScript jQuery, what we can do is, so suppose we have an image with the style, we can apply style. We can use display as none. We can set display as none. Then what will happen is that image will be hidden. It will be hidden, but it will be still available in the page. That means you are not currently watching it. But still it is available in the page. So if you are not watching it, why you are making still available in the page? That makes page heavy. What we can do is, if we are not watching it, we can remove it from the DOM document model. So when required, we can add it to the DOM. Better than showing and hiding that particular area, you can add or remove that area. That means hiding an image. What will happen is, this will keep the image in your page DOM, but hides in the UI. It keeps the image in your page DOM but hides in the UI. So this will not reduce burden on page. It will not reduce burden on page. So then better to use a technique where you can add or remove an element instead of showing and hiding an element. That's what actually ngIf can do. Let's see one simple example how we can manage this. A small example how we can handle this. So technically, how we can manage this, syntactically how we can use ngIf. If we have any image, we can just use ngIf is equal to, we can pass a boolean value or expression. So that means we can use a boolean value, or we can use a boolean expression. Based on that boolean value and expression, ngIf can handle it. So that means we will see how we can manage this and how we can display. So one simple example, how do we work with ngIf? Later we will keep in complex options also. So let's add a simple component here. I am opening an integrated terminal of that app folder. Let's generate one component here, ng generate component, and I'm giving the name for the component as ngIf or simply if demo. Okay, skip test. So we are using a simple if demo. Okay, and we will design a simple screen where we can see how we can implement this ngIf. Later in different examples, we will see that also. Initially, once this component is generated, this component is generated. Let's keep this component in the startup. So I will keep that component in the startup. Let's go to the app module and just add this if demo. So if demo component, okay. In the index, I'm setting it as the startup component, if demo. Fine. Now this is if demo, okay. Let's save this. And if demo is working here, that's fine. Now I want a simple display of the product and show the product information here. So let's see. Some issue here. In the if demo doesn't match. So here, what is the component name if demo? if demo. So selector name, anything wrong? Yes. Selector name. Where is if demo? Yeah. In the TS if demo. If demo component is important. Fine. Yeah, it's not yet saved actually. Fine. Okay. So now we will go to the design, and here I will go to assets. Assets. In assets, I told you assets is a folder. Open this assets folder in Explorer. Assets is the folder where we keep our resources, non-dynamic resources like images and all. So now I will go to assets and I will copy some images into that assets. So I have some images here. So these are the images. I will select any image, some shoe, okay, and I will keep this into assets folder. That is shoe.jpg. Okay, that is a JPG file, shoe.jpg. And when you are using these images and any other files in your application, specially, you need to make sure that you are defining the same capitalization and extension. Even the capitalization for images will be a matter. So images will not display. So and keep all your images into this assets. Okay. Now let's go to if demo component TS. In the if demo component TS, so we are designing a simple product details. Let's create some product details. Yeah, I'm creating a product object, public product, and this is an object. In this product object, we are adding some details. So name, we have a name. So Nike casuals. Okay, and we are adding some price and some price. Okay, and we are adding some photo. Photo is a string. It is in assets slash shoe.jpg. You need to be careful in the path when you define. Okay, that is the product. And I want to display these details. I want to display these details. So for that, first I will design a screen to display these details. So let's go to the HTML, if demo component HTML. And here we are designing a simple div. And let's put a class as container fluid. Okay. And here we added product details. And let's keep a div and with just a class row. And in this two columns, we will keep another div. And here we have a class as col3, that is one column, and another div. And in this, we have defined another column. And let's keep this column 9, class as col9. Okay. Now in the left column, we want to display the details. We need to display the details. I will just use a data list in that data term. And here we have name and data definition. Name will come from directly product name. So product is an object dot name. From product name, we are accessing it. And another data term. So here this is price, and price is coming from product price. So product dot price. Okay, those two details are fine. Now the preview, the image. So that means these are the product details. We are displaying the product details here. So we have name and we have price. And the preview of the product, I want to toggle the preview of the product, whether you want to see or not. Then what we will do is we will keep a button below this data list. We will just add a button below this data list. And this button have a class BTN and BTN primary and BTN block. And this button will have a preview. That means preview is the button. Okay, and that is the preview here. Okay, now you can see this is the preview button available here. So BTN hyphen SM, a small button, not a large button defined here, a small button we are configuring. Okay. Now important is when user clicks on this button, the preview should come. And it should be a toggle button. That means on and off the preview of that particular image. So we need to toggle the on and off that particular image. Now how we can manage, how we can handle this. So right side, I want to display an image. So to display an image in the right panel, so here in the right panel, I will just keep a div. And here I will keep an image source. So we will use property binding. That means SRC. SRC is coming from product dot photo. Product photo have a path. That path is applied here. And we are applying some height and width. That means height is some 200 and the width is 200. We are defining that. By default, this image also displayed there. The default image is displayed there. It is showing that image there. The default image is displayed here. I want to toggle the displaying. Toggle the displaying. Then what I will do here is I will put a property. I will put a property here called show image. Show image is false. I'll put a property show image is false. And this need to be applied to this image div, to this div. And what we will do here, we will use a structural directive ng if is equal to show image. It gets a Boolean value. By default, it is false, defined as false. That means ng if false. If ng if is false, it will remove that element from the DOM. If ng if is false, it will remove the element from the DOM. It will remove that element from the DOM. That means you can see that that element is not there. Observe carefully, inspect element. When we inspect element, in the inspect elements, here right side, you can see this is our Angular page related logic here. And in this I am expanding this. Observe this div. This div is the column 9 div. Column 9 div. It is not having any image here. There is no image there. That means that image img is removed from the DOM. It's removed from the DOM. It's not there. That means it is not using it inside the DOM. If I set it to false or true, it will display. If I set it to true or false, then it will display. That means by default it is set to false. By default it is set to false. And when it is set to true, again it will come. Let's toggle this with a button click. What I will do is, I will create a method public. I will create a method toggle preview. I will create a method toggle preview. This toggle preview should change true to false, false to true like this. That means you know how we can toggle. That means what I will do is, I will say this dot show image. So this dot show image is by default having false. This dot show image is having false, and we need to set it to true or false. We need to toggle true or false. Toggling true or false. Let's see how we can toggle true or false into this. That means show image is already having false. Then let's toggle true or false here. So what I will do is equal to, I can use a simple ternary operator here. I can use a ternary operator here. Generally, how do we define the ternary operator? So to toggle the display, just I can say here, if this dot show image is equal to false, then what we need to do is, we need to set it to true, and else we need to set it to false. We are configuring in this way. Now this is a toggle preview, and I want this toggle preview to work when user clicks the button. That means when user clicks the button, this function will be called. What this function will do, the show image will set to true, and from true to false. If it is true, it will be false, right? You can use anything. You can use anything, right? You can use any technique here, but we need a toggling. You are just turning it to true, then how it will again turn it to false. So that means you need to toggle that, right? Anyway, you can write, it doesn't matter, right? Now this should work when we are clicking on this button. That means on the button I click, we are using the toggle. That means toggle preview. And just for clarity, we will keep some button text also. So I will create another property and btn text, button text. By default, button text is having show. Button text is having show. And we will change this also. So according to the toggle preview, if it is show, then it should display as hide. If it is hide, then it should display as show. We need to toggle the button text also. Then this dot btn text is equal to, it should contain based on here the condition. So if this dot btn text is equal to btn text is equal to show, if it is show, then it should keep it to hide. It should keep it to hide. Otherwise, it should keep it to show. So this is a general text for the button. What I will do here is this btn text, I will apply just beside that button preview. You see preview is there. Beside that preview, I will put that text, that is btn text. That means it will get the value dynamically. Now you can see initially it shows here the preview, and let's refresh this, and it is displaying here. So this is the option. This is show preview. It is showing show preview. And observe carefully here, right side, when we are displaying here. So when we are displaying this, let's change this. You can see now the right side, you can observe in the column 9 there is no image. There is no image related tag. Right side, you can observe that. I click on show preview, then it should display that, and you can see immediately. So inside this column 9, a div is added. Into the div, it comes with an image. A div is added, an image is added, an image element is added here. And I click on hide preview again. The text also changes to hide preview again. And you can see that div that contains the image is removed from there. You can see in the column 9, the div is completely removed. There is nothing inside that here. That means when you click, it is going to add. That div is added. In the div, you have that image. The div, we are having the image. And I click again, then it is removed. It is not available here anymore. So the if condition, generally in our logic, we use for handling one statement to execute when condition true, another statement to execute when condition false. But here ng if, you should not compare like a general if statement. Ng if is a structural directive, and it is responsible for manipulating the DOM elements by adding and removing the DOM element. Currently, we just utilized it in a beginning level example. Later, you will see everywhere coming in. So the intention is to add and remove a block. So click show preview, then it will display the preview, and hide preview, then it will remove. This is not showing and hiding. This is adding and removing element from the DOM. That is good because it reduces the burden on the page when you are removing the element from the DOM and adding the element to the DOM. Right? This is the basic approach. This is the basic approach of working with ng if. So we will use several other examples of ng if, how to deal and how do we work with ng if. This is one structural directive. If there are multiple areas to flip and show, then ng if will not be a good option. Ng if has a lot of other options also. Still, it is not finished. You have just learned how to use an ng if. Actually, ng if can handle the situation with else blocks. It can have an else block. It can have a then block, then and else blocks. So you just saw how do we use if, and if can have an else block, it can have a then block. So we can have multiple conditions defining, multi-level conditions defining in the UI to control the structure. We just saw the basic syntax of how do we use this ng if. Now we will see how you can handle multiple conditions, how we can deal with multiple conditions, and how we can use if true, what should happen, if false, what should happen. Currently, you are defining in this only when true it is showing. On false, I want another block of statement to execute. I don't want to just remove. That means when true, one block will be displayed. When false, another block will be displayed. That means it is currently dealing with only one block of statement, means only one block of DOM structure. I need it to handle two blocks of DOM structure. When true, it should show one block. When false, it should show another block. That means we have to handle, so based on true or false, multiple blocks. Currently, ngIf is dealing with only one block. And if it is true, it is removing the block. And if it is false, it is showing that. That means showing and hiding, it is managing it. We want it to handle multiple blocks. Then we can use ngIf by using else and then blocks also. We can use ngIf with else and then block. And how to deal with else and then blocks? We need some more examples now that we will see in our next session, right? Tomorrow we will continue with this. Okay. Hope you are clear with this. And tomorrow we will continue with if and switch and other structural directives with complex examples. Now we will go into more examples and see how to deal with them, right? In tomorrow's session, we will continue with this. Okay. Right. This example also